30% of Nebraska's corn crop is now above ground, according to the latest USDA crop progress report. That's 12 points ahead of the state's 5-year average and a point better than the national emergence of 29%. Earlier this week, we talked with Nebraska Extension entomologist Bob Wright, who says growers can now begin scouting those emerged fields for insects, starting with cutworms.
Well, as the corn emerges, every field should be scouted for early season insect injury, regardless of whether it's a BT corn or even had a seed treatment. Cutworms are something that if they're abundant enough, we can do something now and try to save the crop before it's damaged anymore. And there's a couple of different types of cutworms we have in Nebraska. Several species overwinter as partly grown caterpillars, and they can do a lot of damage quickly as the plant emerges, so you want to be sure to scout as the corn emerges. The other major cutworm we have is the black cutworm, which doesn't overwinter in Nebraska, but the moth flies up each spring and lays its eggs. And as the caterpillars hatch out, they initially feed on the leaves, and then as they get about half grown, they can get big enough to actually cut the plant at the ground level or below ground level. Regardless of the species, check fields and look for cutting injury or leaf feeding. And
how much damage would be a problem?
Oh, about 3 to 5% injury is our threshold level for cutworms, regardless of the species. And there's a variety of post-emergence insecticides that are effective if you have enough damage to cause problems.
What are some of the other insects that could be out there causing problems for farmers, but that you can't necessarily treat for?
Okay, wireworms and white grubs are the two most common soil insects, and both of them can cause stand loss if they're abundant enough. So at this point, there's no post-emergence treatments, but if they're abundant enough, we may have to make a replant decision. And so that's what you'll be looking for now, is if there's enough stand loss, whether it'd be worth replanting that field.
And that's how you're differentiating the problem between that and cutworms?
Right, yeah, there's a post-emergence treatment for cutworms. There is no post-emergence insecticide treatments for wireworms or white grubs. It's just a replant decision at this time.
Why is it so important to specify the problem that you're having in these fields?
Well, the one thing is, again, you don't want to use a post-emergence insecticide to try to cure wireworm or white grub problems. That's the main issue. What decision are you making? How are you going to use the scouting information is the main point.
Anything in soybeans that producers might be seeing out there right now?
Well, they potentially can be injured by cutworms, wireworms, and white grubs, but typically they're less affected. In terms of cutworms, soybeans are more able to compensate for some stand loss than corn is, and the same thing with the wireworms and white grubs. The other issue is that typically soybeans are planted later, and the wireworms and white grubs cause more problems earlier than later in the season. So typically we have less problems with soybeans, but there is potential in soybeans as well.
Bob recently authored an article on scouting for these insects. It can be found on the CropWatch website. We'll also link to that information on the Market Journal homepage.